This is Animal Health Insider, where we bring you the real news, real insight, real voices from inside the industry.
Welcome to the very first episode of Animal Health Insider. I'm Julie Lawless, and I'm joined with the insiders. I have Beatrice Vos, Stonehaven Transactions. I have Joe Harvey. He is the editor and the editor extraordinaire of S&P Global Animal Health. How do you like that, Joe?
Sounds good.
It's good.
I think that's my exact.
I should say the amazing Beatrice Vos. Oh my gosh, I am so happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you for inviting us.
Lovely.
This is good. This is going to be a good collaboration, I feel like. And when I start telling people about, hey, this is what we're doing, they're all like, mind's blown. This is going to be great. I don't know if you're getting the same feedback, but
This is going to be
don't want
fun.
expectations too much.
Absolutely.
they're like, what should we expect? Oh no. Well, it's as you and I, all of us had a conversation together around, should we do something like this? We really looked out there and said, there are a few great interview podcasts that are happening, but nothing that really kind of gives any analysis, talks through trends, talks through news. And I think there's a need out here for a podcast like this. I don't know if you guys have kind of thought the same thing, or, if you've heard the same feedback from other folks.
Well, if we hadn't thought the same thing, we wouldn't be here, would we? So you've got the right people.
You're so pragmatic.
Well, of course, there's a need, I think. Who doesn't want to listen to people that know about a particular thing, talking enthusiastically, looking through trends, no matter what the industry is?
That's true.
And yeah, maybe animal health is a small industry. It's a relatively young industry, or quite a private industry, but it's a really interesting industry.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yeah.
why not have people talk about it? It's an industry that's growing a lot in all different aspects. So yeah, perfect timing.
It's so true. It's so true. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, Beatrice, as you're out there, working in M&A and transactions, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now.
No, absolutely. And of course, also way beyond transactions. I mean, we've known each other for a long time. We've been partners in crime in the animal health world for, I don't know, probably more than 15 years. So I didn't hesitate a second when you suggested that we start this podcast. I think it's a great idea. I mean, we will have no shortage of interesting topics. But I think,
so true.
At least I hope it's not just about like what we talk about, but also how we approach things. I would like this to be a lot of fun. It's already fun for me, and I think we'll do this from a different lens, right? I mean, we will have interesting interview partners, like leaders in the industry, but we'll also invite pet owners. We'll have a vet talk to us. I was thinking we should also invite maybe an animal activist one day and talk to us and really be
look at you.
be very open and no limits, and let's create some interesting minutes and maybe hours for our listeners.
That's really true. Yeah, those are great ideas. Yeah. I'm going to put Joe on point for interviewing the activist. How's that?
Okay. Surely not Beatrice No Limits Vos from Stonehaven Transactions.
Ooh. Extraordinaire, Joe Extraordinaire, and now No Limits. No, I think that's really great. And I think you're right. One of the things I've been saying is we want to talk to change makers, disruptors in the industry, and it doesn't matter what level, what function. I mean, there are people doing really interesting stuff to move this industry along, and I know the list we've come up with is long because there's just so many people that we want to talk to. Yeah, and so many cool topics.
There's the fact that we're animal health insiders, and that's interesting for people already in the industry, and they want to know about the latest trends or our thoughts on something. But then there's people that won't know the industry that well. They don't know that there's companies out there developing cat therapeutics or methane reduction vaccines or any of these different things. And so I think there'll be two sides to it, that we kind of have a duty to animal health to spread the word on the cool things that are happening, as well as keeping the industry sort of up to date on trends and informed on things they might have missed.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I gave a little flavor for who you guys are, and for those folks that may not know us, we'll have stuff in the show notes, and we'll be talking about it in promos and teasers. But maybe Beatrice, could you kick us off? Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, you're right. You and I spent some time at Elanco together. We've got stories we could tell. But we've got all kinds of stories because, again, this is a small industry. But what are you doing? What are you doing now? What's been your past? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so what I do now is I'm a partner at the Stonehaven Cosmics Group. And Stonehaven has been around for a bit over 10 years. It's a consulting group fully focused on the animal health industry. And we do strategic consulting, we do transactions advice, which is what I'm leading, and we also have an analytics business. I've been with the group for 2 years now, very happy. I think, frankly, the best decision I've taken in my professional life. Really nice. And I joined them because I knew Matthias Hofer really well. He was a colleague at Elanco for a few years before he joined Stonehaven. So prior to Stonehaven, I was with Eli Lilly and Elanco for 15 years in legal functions. My background is in law. And prior to joining Lilly, I worked for international law firms for 10 years, mainly in first in competition law, and then I had a focus on M&A. And when we had our first child, and you've heard the story so many times, I'll keep it short. But the partner in the law firm that I worked for told me, well, Beatrice, when you're back from maternity leave, don't be mistaken, the core office hours, this was in 2009, the core office hours from 9 to 9 will continue to apply to you as they do to everybody else. So no working from home, nothing like that. And I said, well, I wasn't hoping to work less hours. I was just hoping that I could maybe go home, say goodnight to the kids, to our daughter, and then work more from home. And his response was that clients will not accept that, which is of course nonsense. So I went in-house, joined Lilly, and then I became the client. And guess which law firm I didn't hire?
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah, but it's been quite a ride. Yeah.
So you're going to keep us out of legal trouble, Beatrice, correct?
Yeah, I will raise my digital hand if anything is said that should not be said.
Okay. Good. And Joe, you've been in the industry for many years now. As I said, you are the editor extraordinaire. You're the go-to guy to find out anything and everything about animal health. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, it's strange that you should say that I've been in the industry, because am I? Or am I sort of an outsider looking in?
That's a good question.
I've I've got a background in business journalism, originally human health, and it's 13 years ago now that I moved over to animal health without even knowing what animal health was. I don't eat meat. I don't have a pet. I'm completely impartial. And I learnt that the animal health universe was very different to the human health world. And that was 2012. And a lot has happened since then. Lots of stories that have emerged, companies to follow. If I joined the animal health industry now, it'd be much bigger world to get my hand around, to get my head around all the different topics, which is a great thing, because it wasn't necessarily like that 13 years ago. And I suppose as I've evolved as a journalist, so has the industry. Over those years, I've been looking at mergers and acquisitions, financial performances of the big companies, deals, innovation. I've seen the rise of sort of pet therapeutics over that time, diagnostics, technology. and everything in between, the failures and the successes as well.
I would love to see the list of companies that existed in 2012 when you started and what, the companies that exist now, because we've seen kind of that consolidation of the industry, but then also new startups pop up. So maybe it's definitely, I feel like the most exciting time to be in animal health. And I think why this is going to be a lot of fun too. I mean, for my part, communications has been what I've done from day one. Started as a TV reporter 100 years ago, before before digital, folks. So if you try to look for anything out there, it's not going to exist. It's on tape in some dark room somewhere, hopefully, because it was terrible. It was terrible. But then, oh, terrible. But I quickly got into corporate, and then found my way to Mars Pet Care, and then over to Elanco to help build their global corporate communications group and corporate affairs. And that's where I got to work with Beatrice as we did the largest acquisition in animal health history with Bayer. We also did some IPOing. So it was what a dynamic thing. And then in 2022 started Lawless Comms, and now we're helping all kinds of animal health companies, startups and strategics do some amazing work internally and externally through communication. So this podcast felt like a great vehicle for the three of us who aren't tied to one corporation to be able to have some open, honest conversation, which I hope people will enjoy. Yeah. So can we jump into some of that open, honest conversation? We are going to talk to Aaron Schacht today, the CEO of BiomEdit. And as you all know, BiomEdit is a microbiome science company, synthetic biology. They got a lot of interesting projects in their pipeline. They're looking at some methane reduction productivity products for cattle, as well as they've got BE 101, which is one of their products around necrotic enteritis, all targeting the microbiome. And I really think, like, over the past, I'm going to say 5 years. I mean, correct me if you guys think that's different, but over the past few years, I feel like the lid's been blown off microbiome science in a good way, and synthetic biology, and we're just starting to hear more about it and see more products. Do you guys kind of agree with that, or what's your take on microbiome science?
No, definitely. I think it's a really interesting area. And I mean, in my work, I work a lot with startups that work on breakthrough innovation, and they are a lot looking at various microbiome technologies. And also, which is maybe in the broader space, bacteriophages. It's really fascinating, and I think it will play a big role both in prevention and treatment of disease. I think the big question mark really is how will these products fit into the animal health landscape, right? What are their claims? How will that position them? And I think maybe initially people always think of the livestock industry when they think about microbiome,
That's
but
right,
also
yeah.
in companion animals. I mean, there are gut health, gut microbiome products making pets more resistant to diseases will play a big role. The skin has a microbiome, right? And skin diseases are a big problem on the companion animal side, atopic dermatitis, etc. So they can be very efficient to tackle that. But I think the question that vets are going to have is this an add-on to traditional therapies, topical
Right.
use? Will it be fed? Vets are unsure. And I think that uncertainty might lead to slow adoption of new products. So I think companies will need to do a good job in introducing these new technologies in the market. I think it would be much easier on the livestock side, right, where feed additives with health claims are really well established. Enzymes have been around for a long time. And I think microbiome products will play a huge role in complementing or even replacing antibiotics. One example that I remember was an outbreak of pneumonia in cattle in the US, and a vet used lactobacilli nose spray, which was a very early form of using a microbiome product, right? And in many animals, no antibiotics were needed. So it's definitely a very interesting, very effective direction, but it will require very thorough launch preparation and introduction to vets.
Yeah, that's true. Joe, what do you think? What are you seeing out there?
Glad Beatrice went first, mainly because, and I suppose there's a reason behind this, because I'm not the science person.
But you do such a good job of translating science. I forget that sometimes.
Well, this is crucial, though, I think, for the microbiome, because it is not it's not a sort of avian flu. It's not cancer. It's not a category whereby the problem is clear. It's a more of a concept, and as you said, the skin has a microbiome, and is this more of an opportunity in pets or livestock? So probably was more than 5 years ago when I first started hearing about the microbiome in an animal health setting, and immediately I didn't understand what the product was. And I still have that problem now. If you see a startup pitching or any company pitching, and they say they're targeting the microbiome, but what's the end product?
What is
where is the money being made here? And that maybe that's more of a problem on the company's side. And you mentioned BiomEdit, and I think one sort of minor victory for them and for any company in this space will be, this is the problem we're solving, and this is how we're going to do it, because it's not a traditional animal health area. And I suppose off the top of my head, and I could be wrong, but most of the companies working in this space aren't major corporations. I suppose that doesn't necessarily mean that none of those big animal health companies are targeting microbiome.
Yeah, that's true. We might not see their full pipelines, but well, I mean, we know from at least BiomEdit started as the carve out. That was the nutritional health segment, right? For Elanco, but they diverted those funds elsewhere into the pet health pipeline, and that's where I think Aaron will tell us about how he carved out BiomEdit. But you're right. I mean, I don't think we see it in some of the other strategics.
And I think we will, right? I mean, I know that strategics are interested in potentially acquiring or licensing in those assets from the smaller startups and innovative kind of boutiques, right? So I think that's where it's going. I think it's just too early, right? But once they are closer to approval and getting launched into the market, I would expect to see some Elanco and Zoetis and BI and MSD names behind it.
Yeah. And
it could be one of the areas in the livestock segment that in the future could be a new category, because we're getting loads in the companion animal with osteoarthritis, oncology, cardiology, etc. But we're lacking in the livestock space. However, there's stuff happening with the microbiome in the pet sector as well. And again, I'm not the science guy, but I was reading something the other day that said Mars has mapped 80% of the pet microbiome, which kind of suggests we still, well, not we, but out there, the industry still doesn't quite know what the microbiome even is fully yet. They're still exploring all aspects of it. So that's quite exciting, I think, to know that even research centers out there haven't fully explored all of the microbiome. So I do think we're a long way away from it being a category that's got lots of commercial products in, but there's a lot of research going on and lots of interesting opportunities. I think with BiomEdit, another aspect of that is that potentially for me the most prominent microbiome company, but their history is really different to the way any other sort of startup or animal health business has been established. So it's interesting that they're the standout in microbiome, but they also stand out for other reasons because of the way they're set up, their Spinout from Elanco, their partnership, and the way they've raised funds is a bit different as well.
And they've been able to raise funds, which is, in this industry, that's a crowning achievement in itself, to be able to get investors signed up, which kind of, I wonder, goes back to what you said before of, are we starting to now better understand what the microbiome is? They could be leading the way in that area with, just even being able to explain it to investors in a way that they're getting money for it. So that's a positive.
I think what really plays into the commercial opportunity of these products is, number one, like the holistic impact it has on an organism, right? I mean, we all know also for humans, if your gut is healthy, that has an impact on a lot of your functions in your body. And the same applies to animals, right? And the second aspect is the prevention of disease that comes as a consequence of that. And I mean, of course, the whole topic around antimicrobial resistance and regulation on the use of antibiotics, that's all a real headwind to those products. So there's a big market for products that provide alternatives to antibiotics, and even better if it helps prevent bacterial infections. So I think that's a big commercial opportunity, but it's also I think it somehow feels better if you help prevent animals getting sick than only treat them when they got sick.
That's right. That's
but I don't want to be negative here, so I'll be negative. And then
Joe, it's positive. Okay, Joe. We're
okay.
Bring the negativity too. Bring the challenge, Joe. Bring the challenge.
You were saying BiomEdit have been really successful with their funding, but conversely, sort of the other side to that is, no matter how successful one company is with funding, that takes funding away from potentially 5 other startups in animal health, such as the lack of funding around. I shouldn't really say taking funding away from other animal health startups, but the lack of funding in animal health, you see success in one area, but actually there are 5, 6, 10 that haven't got funding. And that's a whole other story. Maybe because BiomEdit are the most prominent microbiome startup in animal health, they can capture the excitement in that area, and that will be it until that company is successful. That will ignite some other deals, and only then will all the investors thinking, we've invested in this animal health microbiome thing, we don't really understand it, but if it's successful, we'll do some more deals, and if it isn't, then we won't look at animal health ever again. I don't know.
That's why Aaron is a pioneer, right?
Yeah, we're gonna hope they're the catalyst, right? Yes, and why Aaron's a pioneer. I think if I needed somebody to captain that ship, Aaron would be the person to captain to really captain that ship. I think what I've seen, because Beatrice, you and I have worked with him previously, and I think this is a really good segue into, what do you guys think about Aaron? I mean, for at least from my point of view, when I think about the words that I would use to describe Aaron, man, he thinks so fast. Like, his brain works way faster than anybody else's brain that I know. But he's able to be strategic at the same time, which I'm like, that is, that blows my mind sometimes what he comes up with. I don't, what do you guys think about Aaron? You know him.
Yeah, when Aaron, he had this habit during the Bayer deal of first thing in the morning, his morning, which I think starts at, 4 o'clock.
I think
Which is fine for me because it was my kind of what was it, late morning. You didn't need a cup of coffee when Aaron called you. You were awake very, very quickly. Super sharp, super quick, and we had very heated discussions. I mean, people from the outside who wouldn't know us would probably think we had really bad fights, but we didn't. it was always very respectful, and yeah, I really like that guy. We had a lot of fun and really good times, and we would profoundly disagree on certain things at work, and an hour later sit in a bar, have a beer together, and have a lot of fun. And I think that's really a lot of how he is, right? I mean, he's just profoundly a really good guy, right? And that sounds really so profane, but it really isn't. And no, he's definitely one of my favorites.
I'm not going to pass judgment on CEOs of animal health companies, but
Joe's drawing the line. We know not to ask you these questions again. No.
But it comes back to my point earlier on. From my point of view, a good startup and therefore a good startup's CEO can explain the problem and the solution sensibly and charismatically and enthusiastically, and Aaron does that. I think it's interesting that he's the CEO because are we on the second or third generation of animal health startups? Well, in the microbiome, we're on the first generation, but in terms of startups, he's not an unknown. He's not an unknown. He was in the industry beforehand. He knows the industry knows him. This isn't a startup that's just appeared out of nowhere, that they're trying to work out the animal health space. They've been in human health and they're trying to get into animal health just to make some more money, but they don't actually know much about the market. He's deeply ingrained in the market. And we're seeing a lot of animal health startups, livestock and pet, now that have that connection to the industry. They have employees or senior management from major animal health companies, and that they're not complete unknowns, and that is so important. You look at I think recent animal health startups that have been acquired, some have been ex-Elanco employees. That's what Aaron is. I'm not saying BiomEdit wants to be acquired, but it shows the connections into the industry and the understanding of what, not only what the animals need, but what the industry needs. Because you can come up with a great product that makes gut health slightly better, but if the animal health companies can't sell it, then that's the end of that venture.
That's exactly right. So I'm getting ready to talk to Aaron. He's actually going to join me here in the studio in Indianapolis. Since he's here, we get to sit down together and have a conversation. I would love to know from you all, what are the questions that you would ask Aaron? I may ask some, I may ask all. I don't know. We'll see where this, because it really is a conversation that we're going to have versus just a interview. So I would love to know what would you guys ask Aaron if you had the chance?
Should I go first?
Go for it. Go for it.
So my question number one would be, I've known him for a while, we work together. I'd love to know what something that I don't know yet. What is something surprising about Aaron Schacht that I and probably other colleagues don't know about him? Then secondly, appealing to his scientific curiosity. If you have an unlimited research budget and zero bureaucratic hassle, what would be the first experiment you would embark on? And thirdly, if you could have dinner with anyone in the animal health world, who would it be and what would you ask?
Okay, those are good ones. Did you come up with those all on your own? Those are good.
Of course.
Of course you did. Okay, I like that one too. I'm dying to know what he would say about an unlimited research budget, because he's good. I hope he only has one answer. He might have a lot of answers on that one. That's a good one. Joe, do you have any thoughts on what you want to know from Aaron?
So not an unlimited research budget, but if he could change, if he was the CEO of all of animal health, what one thing, if it was within his power, just change it, what would it be? Change something, one way that the industry operates, or something that's unfair, something that's not good enough. One thing.
Okay, I love that.
Or two, or three. Seeing as you're going to be talking to him, I'll let you get political with him. Aaron's based in the
Okay.
US. How has the US government shut down tariffs, job cuts at USDA, FDA, EPA?
Mm-hmm.
Has that impacted animal health, or will it not? Is animal health immune to anything that's going on government-wise in the US?
That's a good one.
See if he wants to answer that.
Okay. I like that one. Because I think we're all wondering that too, especially with the Doge cuts that happened earlier in the year. Is that really affecting, the CVM or USDA? So that's a really good one.
Maybe
like
it's something we won't see repercussions from for a while. But yeah, interested to hear his thoughts.
Great.
And let's try and get ahead of the news as well. Let's see this time next year what's going to be happening to BiomEdit. What are they going to be celebrating?
And
So
isn't
if we're
still a
sitting
standalone
here,
company.
Yeah. If we're sitting here a year from now, what's it look like?
Yeah, then we don't need to interview him in a year's time.
We could just replay it.
Should be so accurate that we won't need to talk to him again.
Okay, I like that. Although I do enjoy sitting down with Aaron. So maybe not, Joe. I don't know. Okay, you guys, I think I'm armed with my questions, and I appreciate you talking through microbiome science, some about BiomEdit and Aaron, because this really helps me as I go in to have that interview with him. And I am so excited. I can't wait for our next opportunity to talk. We'll have another really great guest that we'll bring on, and I'll get a little bit of insight from you guys. But thank you, insiders, and welcome to everybody who's
Before
watching.
we sign off, so we promised our listeners some fun, didn't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay,
So
Beatrice.
I have my list of bad animal jokes. So here's a question for you. What do you call a line of rabbits hopping backward?
A line of rabbits hopping backwards. I have no idea.
Receding hairline.
That's quite good.
We're gonna have like a
So
instead
if you want to hear more of those,
So instead of like bad dad jokes, we have bad animal health.
we have lots of those. I have a long list.
And if you're only interested in those jokes, you can skip to the end of the podcast to listen to them every week
Exactly.
or every month, or
and I like it. No,
until
no
we
jokes
ban
without liking
Beatrice
the
from.
podcast.
Okay, Joe, I I feel like you and I are gonna have to come up with a shtick or something to match Beatrice. I don't know. I might bring you like a cocktail of the week. That could be my. Y'all know I love having a good cocktail, so we could do a cocktail of the week. I don't know.
Maybe sing the theme tune. I don't know.
Are you gonna sing the theme tune?
I don't know. We'll come back to that.
Okay, so that's
Okay,
your
good.
assignment for the next time you're recording
It
this.
is.
We're gonna hear Joe sing the theme song. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Have a good time. Have a good day, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, see
Perfect.
you soon.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
Julie. Have fun with Aaron.
Thanks. Oh my gosh, Aaron, I am so excited that you're here to join us for the very first episode. So thank you. And it's actually really cool that we get to sit down in Indy
You bet.
for Animal
I've been
Health
looking forward to this.
Insider. Have you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now I can't disappoint. So you and I have known each other for a long time. My gosh, going back even to our days of sitting on the leadership team with Elanco. I mean, that was like 2015. And then we went through this mind-blowing amount of change. I mean, we did the IPO, we did just all of this, the industry's biggest acquisition with Bayer. It was insane. And you played a big part of that. through the IPO, through all more than just one acquisition. There was a ton. So we want to today talk to you a little bit about some of that. How did that past shape you today? But our insiders, so as you mentioned, it's me, it's Beatrice Vos from Stonehaven Transactions, and it's also Joe Harvey from S&P Global Animal Health.
Three of my favorite people.
Oh man, that's a little scary. But we sat down before this and had a little round table talk. We talk about, trends, topics, but we also talked about you and we talked about BiomEdit, and we all agreed on a couple of things. So, okay, first we agreed that you are brilliant, so don't get a big head.
No.
We also agreed that you're very fast thinking, like you think really quickly, but you're also deeply strategic and you're also hilarious. So we like hanging out with you.
That's good.
You've also got this unique combination of being an executive leader, also a researcher at heart. You're a scientist at heart. And then this investor mindset, which is a really unique combination. So what we want to do is dig into your brain, have a conversation, and Beatrice and Joe also gave me some questions.
Okay.
So they won't be hard. They might be a little crazy, but they
Okay.
won't be hard. Okay. So as we talked about living through some of those intense and defining chapters together, I really am interested as you look back, because I've done this for myself to reflect a little bit. What do you think in that dynamic period helped really shape you to who you are today?
Sure. Yeah, it was really exciting time. I spent the first 25 years at Lilly, and I
Yeah.
was sort of, in various different, I would call it junior executive roles, not senior executive roles at Lilly, where I
Right.
was really at the cold face of trying to drive transformational change, but
Yeah.
not as accountable as somebody who had to sort of command the resources and the respect of an organization to help facilitate it. So Elanco really gave me my first opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And it was not just first sort of senior executive type role, but it was also my first role in animal health. So I was learning on the fly.
Oh, that's right. You were coming in from
That's right.
humans, so making
Yeah.
that
So
switch.
maybe I had some benefit of not having to unlearn some things. And
That's true.
maybe I leveraged that, or we leveraged that, because you came from outside Elanco
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
in not getting stuck in old patterns and really embracing transformation as the way forward, as opposed to some bargain you had to negotiate with yourself that was going to be a better way than what you'd been doing for some time.
That's really true. And I
So
remember that of you. I remember you kind of scratching your head and going, why are we doing it this way?
yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's the benefit.
That's
A lot of
yeah.
times you use consultants to do that. They
That's
come in and
right.
challenge the dogma and the status quo. But I think I brought some of that naturally. But it was also just fundamental curiosity,
Yeah.
and really thrilled with what I was learning in animal health. So a little bit of a kid in a candy store opportunity. Poke at this. How does that work? And that led to maybe some rethinking of how things should work.
Yeah.
And of course, Jeff galvanized the team around this. We saw, I think, the writing on the wall in 2015, post the Novartis acquisition, that maybe bigger things were coming for Elanco
That's
beyond
right.
just be an animal health division that was a stable cash producer inside Eli Lilly and Company.
That's right. We could
And
feel that.
I think
for
we all
real.
started to embrace that, and Jeff painted the vision, and then we all had to play our roles to pull it together, and we had to learn how to work together, because it was a very diverse team
Yeah.
that had to come together. And so I think the challenge, both of the business, because the business wasn't maybe as good as everybody thought, and the circumstance, we had this big ambition, really galvanized the team. And I think the thing I learned probably more than anything is you embrace the challenge and the obstacles as the way to success, not as something standing in the way of it.
Mm.
And that when you do that, you unlock what's possible, as opposed to
Yeah.
just settle for what's practical.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably served me very well in the next chapter of starting my own company.
I can see that theme of what's possible come out in you, not only in Elanco and being a bit of a challenger and challenging, being at that leadership table and challenging, okay, can we do this a little differently? And how about we think about it like that? But then also the launch of BiomEdit and
Mhm.
just, seeing the assets and understanding how to put them together and carve them out, which was really cool.
Yeah,
That was
another cool problem, another puzzle to
yeah,
solve.
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is from Beatrice. This is a little bit of a more of a fun question, so we're
Good.
gonna mix it up a little bit. She says, since we used to work together, I already know you're brilliant. But what's something surprising about you that maybe colleagues still don't know?
Wow. Well, you already mentioned I like to laugh and I like to make fun and poke fun, not just at others, but at myself. I think that that's the fair way to do it. It's easy to sort of point things out that humor you, but when you can do it about yourself, I think it's a form of humility. Look, I think I'm a big science fiction and fantasy fan.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
wanted
could
to
see
be a
that.
writer once upon a time when I started school. And I thought I would write about science, and then ultimately that would give way to writing, about science fiction. So
Oh,
I
that's
still have it in me, a book or two.
ooh, I
I've
love
done some
that.
noodling around that, but I
Huh,
haven't really done anything serious. I've written some short stories.
have you?
Yeah, but I haven't tried to get published, but it's just sort
Yeah.
of, flexing the muscles a little bit and learning how to, develop narratives and those things. And I think that storytelling capability helps you in leadership as well. If you can,
Boy,
especially if you're driving transformational change, helping people
that's so
see
true.
a future in terms that they can relate with, and maybe even feel emotional about, I think creates a greater bond to the goal and the objective.
That's really awesome. And I actually wrote down here the one thing that I think people don't know about you, which is related to that, is that you were a journalism major
I started,
in
yeah.
you started in undergrad, which we always used to say, oh man, he can write it for us.
Yeah,
Which you kind of do, the
yeah,
key messages, and which is so, as you said, it's so important when you're making big changes,
yeah.
which is great. Okay, so I remember when you and I had a first discussion, right as you were thinking about BiomEdit or how to package these assets and carve them out of Elanco. And I mean, I think it was bold. It was totally, absolutely needed. But I think, and it really is, it's a disruptor in a good way, microbiome,
Hmm.
synthetic biology. What convinced you, though, that this was the right thing to do?
Yeah, it was sort of an attrition, so to speak, when
Mm-hmm.
we first set up with the idea that and ultimately a large restructuring was going to occur at Elanco. That
Mm-hmm.
really was the ultimate consequence of the Bayer acquisition. It was taking those final steps
Yep.
to transform Elanco into what it could be going forward, not just the consequence of what it had done to get there. I knew that R&D was going to have to take some structural change within it, and normally the way this goes about is you give everything a haircut. You don't
That's
want to
right.
disappoint anybody, so you
3%
disappoint
of
everybody.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's right.
right.
Yeah.
And in this case, it made sense to me that said there's just certain areas that weren't ripe enough to compete for funding in a constrained environment that Elanco was focused on, and a near-term ambition on the pet health side, right? And so
Yeah.
this was a platform that we built starting in 2016 that I just worried wasn't going to get the attention it deserved. And of course, our first approach was to find out if there was a strategic buyer. Could somebody else, write us a check for these cool assets?
That's right.
Because that was useful in the short term.
Yeah.
Or would a private equity firm like this? Because it really did have growth potential when you looked at the pipeline. And there was some talk in the early days of maybe we include a product line or a
Oh,
product in that, a
I don't
nutritional
remember
health
that.
product in that.
Wow.
And so maybe you could attract private equity to come in
Mm-hmm.
and do a large financial sponsorship deal around it. And then ultimately, when neither of those really manifest through that latter part of 2021, it became clear the only option was to try to do something external from a venture standpoint. And I contemplated my own situation. I'd been at Elanco 6 years. We built this big pipeline. I thought it was very well set up to succeed. I
Yeah,
think 5 years later, we can talk about it and say Elanco is punching above its weight from an innovation revenue
that's true.
standpoint. I'm not
Yeah.
taking credit for this because the team that stayed behind and finished the work are the ones that deserve the
Mm.
credit. But at least I felt confident that that was likely to be the case,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to do something that could have industry level impact, perhaps, as
Yeah.
opposed to just product level impact. And so this seemed to be a really good opportunity, and I suggested to Jeff that maybe this is how we go about taking care of this, and he agreed. And so, come early December in 2021, we decided that was the move to make. By the end of the year,
Wow.
The decision had been made to carve out the assets, and I worked out an arrangement where I took a small loan from Elanco, formed a temporary company so that I could hire all the people that were
Mm-hmm.
getting let go because of the restructuring, who would be the formative players, 20 employees who would be the foundational players for BiomEdit.
That's wild.
And if I'd have taken time to think about what that would require, I might not have done it. But I
That's
think we got to
true.
the point where it said, it's just time to go.
It's time
Let's
to
figure
do
it
it.
out. And we
Yeah.
did ultimately.
Yeah. And what a really great, strong group of people who really understand microbiome science, understand synthetic biology.
Yeah.
And that's always one thing that I am just continually in awe of how you can, and this probably goes back to your journalism and writing background. You can take this really deep science and help people really understand what it is. So let's do that with the microbiome. Help
Sure.
me understand, why you're so excited about this area of science and what it can do for animals.
Yeah, really, as I came to Elanco, I really became very purposely acquainted with the concept, and it was really built on me joining at a time when Elanco had made a commitment that they were going to develop a certain number of
Oh, that's right.
shots on goal for alternatives to antibiotics.
That's right.
And I think when I showed up, Jeff had promised at a White House gathering that there would be
Yes. Yeah.
25 pipeline entries, and
Mhm.
I heard about this challenge that was now laid at the feet of the head of R&D, and I asked folks how many we had, and we had 4. So we needed 21 more ideas, and the 4 were obvious things like vaccines, right? That
Yeah.
frankly Elanco had already started to work on, and I had to believe that there had to be better ideas than that. So I polled the best and brightest minds in the research organization, and it turns out that we had some really talented people, Arvind Kumar, Dharanesh
Yeah.
Gangaya, and others who were already working on microbiome-based strategies.
Hmm.
And as a chemist, it resonated with me for the simple reason, if we look at what antibiotics are, the molecules themselves, they're metabolites typically from a natural source, either an organism or a plant.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of an organism, that's actually, those are metabolites that are present in a microbiome setting.
Hmm.
So all of what we need to control, let's say, pathogen growth or the damage that pathogens cause is already there within the microbiome.
Yeah. It's
We
in,
just,
it's in us.
it's in us.
It's
We
in
just
us.
extracted it as an industry. We extracted it from that,
Yeah.
built big plants to grow them up, put them back into feed and fed them back in. What if we could do that inside the animal
Yeah.
by leveraging what the naturally occurring organisms, the good bugs that are there, do, and or augmenting them with synthetic biology to let them do it locally instead of in factories
cool.
in some cornfield somewhere. So
It's
from my
amazing.
perspective, that was the appealing thing from my perspective about where the science could go. What made it tractable is the work the team had already done. They'd already begun to move in that direction. It just needed to be crystallized,
Mm.
and then given some additional ambition about shooting bigger,
Yeah.
as opposed to just a project inside Elanco. Let's build a platform outside Elanco.
Wow. And you think about that. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and look how far you all have come now, especially as BiomEdit. I think, there's been a lot of interesting milestones since the company was established in 2020. That was April of 22. I mean, we just heard about milestones around BE 101, which is your non-antibiotic poultry biologic, and then you've got some great methane news. Can we start with BE 101
Mhm.
and just when we talk about necrotic enteritis, there's no cure. There's no real cure for this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about $6 billion that producers are losing, plus, how many animals
Right.
every year. I mean, this is a big issue that you're trying to tackle.
It is, and interestingly, in a way, I think the industry has gotten comfortable with it, and so
Yeah,
that's a little bit
yeah,
the
it's true.
opportunity and the challenge. But to your point, the only thing that's really worked well against them are really antibiotics directly
Yep.
control the damage the pathogen can cause by killing the pathogen,
Mhm.
which leads to resistance. So we want to avoid that. And then there are other products like coccivaccines or ionophores, which are commonly used, but what they control is coccidiosis, which
That's
is a
right.
precondition for necrotic enteritis. So
Mm.
there's no direct non-antibiotic solution aimed directly at the disease process itself. And that's what we envisioned with BE 101 is let's leverage a microbial delivery system, um, probiotics that we sourced from the chicken's gut,
Hmm.
engineer them to express neutralizing antibodies towards the toxins that cause the damage from the main pathogen, and so directly interfere with the disease process as opposed to the conditions around it. And in that sense, what we
Hmm.
found is really targeted activity and effect that is in some ways unrivaled.
Yeah.
We hope to make that plain for producers, but I talk about that other challenge. They've been living with this problem for so long. They've kind of settled for what's out there, vaccines and ionophores,
That's right.
and there's really been no new innovation to get them excited. So we have to sort of rekindle that flame for them in the coming year, but I'm excited about the potential for this product to do that.
And your timelines, well, first of all, have you been affected by, there's been a recent government shutdown, there's been some, layoffs of federal government workers. Does that affect the timelines for delivering these types of
Fingers
medicines?
crossed, for sure, the
Knock on
regime
wood?
change
Yeah,
did not result in any, we didn't
that's right.
experience any sort of setbacks. No, there
Yeah.
was lots of noise in the system about, layoffs and things, but we didn't experience that. So either we
That's
had
good.
forged a good relationship, and I'll give our regulatory team credit, forged a good relationship that kept us sort of front and center. And interacting with regulatory agencies is always has to be a productive tension,
Hmm.
right? You want to challenge them and push them to embrace new technology. They inside really want to do it, but they've got to uphold standards that belong to everything that they've done before.
That's true.
So
So
there's
if
a
it's
negotiation.
if it's a novel, new category, or you've got to create this kind of pathway
Yeah.
for it, so there's a tension there, I
Yep, there
guess,
is
that
no question.
yeah.
But we've forged a productive collaboration with the USDA. They've been great. And then through the recent shutdown, we we had one thing on their plate, and that is the protocol for our field safety trials for BE 101. We're waiting to
Oh,
get approved.
oh,
We submitted it just before the shutdown, and we haven't heard from them yet. It's a pretty straightforward protocol, so we're very hopeful that in the coming weeks and hopefully no more than a month, we have that in our hands. If we get it by early January, our timeline won't be affected.
okay, that's
And
great.
so we're sitting here in middle of November.
Yeah,
It's reasonable to assume that we'll see it before the end of the year, and we'll be just fine.
great. Then what does the conditional licensor, what's your time for that? What's
Yeah.
the time frame that you're thinking?
So we think that with a little bit of buffer built into review time, there's really two things that they need to review to approve the product remaining. One is the results from the field safety trials themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The second is they need to test our material made in our pre-licensing serial commercial batches. By the way, we've completed 2 of those,
That's
and we
great.
have a third one starting. You only need 2 to meet the requirement. And so hopefully between really the early part of next year through the mid part of next year, they will have received and had a chance to review and approve all of that. We are saying that we will be ready to commercialize and ship product October 1st.
Wow.
And that's
Yeah.
what we're sticking to. It could come a little quicker.
Yeah.
And we feel like we're in a good place to do even better than that if the review process enables that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Joe had a question for you about, if we're sitting here in the same exact place next year,
hmm
where do you hope BiomEdit is?
Yeah. Great question. So I think we're going to be we're not a pre-revenue company anymore.
Right.
We will have booked
Mhm.
sales, hopefully. That means that at least somebody was willing to pay for it. Now, as you know, in production agriculture, proof is in the pudding, right? They got to
Mhm.
trial it in their
That's right.
system before they're going to buy it. But we believe we'll be able to work some trialing in before conditional
Oh
licensure.
wow, that's fantastic.
And hopefully we have some customers enthusiastic about what they've experienced and want to entertain at least using it in part of their complexes. If that's the case, we'll have booked our first revenue, or at least fulfilled our first orders. And at the same time, like any venture funded company, you're always thinking about cash runway and cash
Mm.
burn. We have, based on our successful Series B raise that we announced back in July, raised enough capital to get us basically through the first quarter of 2027.
Mm.
So if we're sitting
That's
here in
good.
November 2026, I've got 5 months of cash left.
That's great.
Effectively. And
Yes.
so I'm thinking about where's the 6th and 7th and 8th month going to come from. But realistically, with a product in the marketplace and hopefully good progress on our other pipeline, raising money won't be as challenging as it was for our Series B. We open ourselves up, because we're a revenue
Mhm.
generating company, to a different pool of investors that will take a look at the company. So I'm quite enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're going to be open to partnering. We will look at partnering the product instead of commercializing on our own,
Mm,
but we have to be ready to commercialize on our own in the event we can't find a suitable
that's
partnership.
right.
And who knows what happens with the rest of our pipeline, but it could be a much more compelling story for somebody to say that platform has proven itself. That's a whole new stream of innovation that is additive to, let's say, a large player. It's not going to be duplicative, and in which case it ought to have a certain kind of attraction.
Yeah. So you'll be in a good spot come
We hope so. Yeah.
2026 when we're
Yeah.
sitting back here again. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
That'll be
Exciting.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to talk about kind of that second part of the pipeline that we've heard about recently, which is methane reduction and
Yeah.
productivity. Okay, you're partnering with the world's biggest players. I mean, with the Gates Foundation,
Right.
Bezos, their Earth Fund grant. I mean, that's really impressive stuff. You've got a bunch of things going on, not just one project that they're
Right.
all funding, right?
Right.
Can you tell us kind of a little bit about what that is
Sure.
and why?
When we spun out the platform that would become BiomEdit, we had ambitions around the methane program.
Mm,
And in fact, the temptation early when we were trying to raise money for the Series A is everybody wants to invest in this. Go ahead and say you're doing it. I didn't feel like we were credible enough technology wise. And it wasn't a knock to the team. It's just nobody had spent enough time on it. And so I
yeah.
didn't feel like I wanted to create expectations with investors that was going to be an area that they could bet on right now and bet full force the way we wanted them to. And so we didn't include that in our Series A story. But I expected and wanted to be able to include it in our Series B story. But I didn't want, because the investors put money in for something other than that, I didn't want to invest their money in something that they hadn't bet on.
Mm,
So I challenged the team, we're going to have to get non-dilutive financing to fund our methane program. And so the team rallied behind that cause, put together a very large grant proposal to the Gates Foundation. And what do you know? We were successful in achieving it, a $4.5
that's
million
amazing.
3-year grant that really supported from the first idea all the way to the best ideas we had on the
Mm,
methane program, with this idea of we thought we could modulate the rumen microbiome either through natural organisms being supplemented, probiotics, or through well-adapted organisms being converted into delivery vehicles to deliver biomolecules that could suppress methanogen activity.
mm.
Methanogens are the little microorganisms that consume the byproducts of fermentation and make methane that then erupts from the cow. We
I
thought we
like
could
that.
not.
Erupts from the cow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we
Cow
thought that's a
burps.
better word.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's nice.
That's a better word. Well, yeah, we could do the R-rated version of this
Yeah,
later.
that's right.
So, and we thought that would be a viable strategy, and Gates agreed with us and supported the grant. So that got us going, but it opened a door. It didn't
Hmm.
just. We now started interacting, and Arvind Kumar and Dwi Susanti, our lead scientist leading this program, really became quite familiar with a lot of the players in the methane emission reduction
Ah,
space. And we followed that with a grant from the Global Methane Hub to come up with genetic systems for engineering rumen microorganisms. And then we since followed that with really probably the most interesting part of what we've been able to develop is a strategy that uses machine learning AI to correlate the genetics of the cow with the food and calorie intake that they consume, that gets fermented in their rumen,
mm-hmm.
along with rumen microbiome, and aims to predict what kind of methane emitter and or protein producer that cow will be.
Wow.
And so if we can do that, if we can have a decoder ring, if
Yeah.
you tell me genetics, feed, and microbiome composition, then I can tell you what kind of methane phenotype this cow will have, or water buffalo if you're in India.
Yeah.
And maybe that can be, well, we know it'll be a useful tool for our purposes, but obviously one of the aspects of the grant was to generalize this tool and make it available for others.
That's really cool. So you could, so would that help you become more breed specific if we're
It
talking
might.
about
That
methane
that might be what
reduction
you
or,
learn.
yeah,
Yeah, that
it
might
could,
be what you learn.
that's really, and I guess my other question around that is we're talking about methane production, but we're also really talking about
For
productivity
sure.
too,
For
right?
sure.
Like the
Yep.
two, you
Yeah.
you kind of need the two,
Yeah, here's the
both of them
chemist in
together,
me,
right?
right? You
Yeah.
got chemistry and biology going on in a rumen, and what happens when a cow eats food and ferments it in the rumen is hydrogen gets produced,
Hmm.
and the methanogens are just they have one job. They show up for one job, and that's to consume hydrogen to make methane.
Yeah.
Other organisms want to consume that hydrogen and make building blocks for protein or building blocks
Mm.
for fat. And so they're competing for hydrogen with these other things. And methanogens are a kind of organism called archaea. And archaea are niche dwellers. If you go to the bottom of an ocean, you look for a thermal vent. The
Yeah.
only microorganisms you find at the bottom of the ocean in a thermal vent are archaea,
Huh.
and they're able to consume what's going on down there and thrive off of it. So so they're very sturdy. They
Yeah.
dominate small niches, and they do one thing and they do one thing well. And our job is to basically take their livelihood away as best we can,
Destroy it. Yes. Yeah.
and not upset the physiologic balance of the rumen
Yeah.
in the process. So it's a very complex challenge and problem. It won't be solved without AI because the human brain is not good enough. There are not enough good human brains to sort of do that on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to pour through massive piles of data to probably extract the key learnings. So from that standpoint, and that'll just set us up then to say, here are the ways in which you can suppress methanogen activity, or at least observe in nature where it's suppressed, and see if you can't replicate
Hmm.
those dynamics with food, genetics, and microbiome composition.
What a really cool way to use AI.
Yeah.
We keep talking about, everybody's talking about AI right now and how you're using it. I mean, that is, that's a fantastic way to use AI.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
hope
for the planet, for
let's hope
animals.
we make some history with that.
Yes, I
Yeah.
hope so too. Okay, so a couple of fun questions here. Joe wants to know if you had a magic wand
Mm.
and could change one thing in the animal health industry, what would it be?
More risk capital.
Oh, what do you mean by that? More risk capital.
So I think as an industry, given the potential we have and the challenges we face in animal health, animal well-being, sustainability, we are not able to rise enough to the innovation challenge because of the way that risk capital flows in. And let me break it into two categories. You got four big players. They each so if I were to do the math, call it 10, 16, 21, 20, 25 billion in revenue between the top four.
Yeah. Yeah.
They invest less than 10% into R&D.
Mm.
Okay. On the human pharma side, if you took any four players that added up to 25 billion in revenue, they would be investing, the smaller they are, the more they tend to invest. They'd be investing twice as much, 20% into R&D, maybe
Wow.
25. Because they understand biotech risk and they understand you got to take lots of shots on goal.
Yeah.
And the thing you have on the human side as well is you've got a buyer universe,
Yeah.
right, that will buy those small companies when they pioneer new technology. We have a small buyer universe, and therefore they invest very little. And we have a small investor universe because it's a small buyer universe. So we've got to get these big animal health companies to higher levels of growth.
Yeah.
And we got to get venture capital or risk capital to come in and look at that as an opportunity as opposed to a side gig or a side bet on something else.
Do you think it's a fair comparison? Because a lot of times folks will compare animal health to human health industry. Do you think it's a fair comparison?
No, it's
Or
not. I mean, arguably the market size is different.
market sizes are different? Yeah,
But realistically, the scientific space is similar. The risks are
that's
similar
true.
and the same.
Yeah.
Animal health, people say that, just divide human health by 10 and you get the answer, right? I think probably we're punching 20-fold below our weight on the innovation side instead of 10-fold below our weight on the
Wow.
innovation
Yeah.
side.
So if we cranked it up, just
If
even
we
a
could get if we could
few,
get the animal health majors investing 15,
yeah.
maybe even 20% of sales in R&D, then I think we'd start to see both an appetite to acquire. They become acquirers. They might even, they could work through a different model. They don't have to own everything.
That's
They
right.
could put their money into ventures, but that would attract other risk capital to the party in a new
Seeing
way.
folks that are outside of the industry.
Yep.
Are we seeing that a little bit of people coming in from outside the
A little. We did
VC
through, if you
private
look at the
equity?
run up of the last big bubble, right, 19 through
Mhm.
21, we saw more capital come to the table, but it was coming from different sources. The ag tech players were leaning in, biotech players were leaning in, and sustainability investors were leaning in. A lot of those have had challenges, right, in getting
Yeah.
returns for the money they put. So we've seen a little step back
Mm.
and a lot of concentration in some, we know that will work. Monoclonal antibodies in pets.
Yeah.
Kind of
Pets,
bets.
pets,
But
pets.
diversifying outside of that has been challenging.
Yeah, you can definitely see, over the past few years, just pets, pets, pets. I mean, the pandemic too,
Sure.
right? People
Yeah.
are
So
getting pets, but
a lot of things added up to make that make sense.
yeah,
And as a result, you're seeing more innovation on the pet side, and it's starting to look more like human biotech on the pet side.
hmm
The same could be true for animals. You got two daunting challenges. There's multiple species, so it's hard to pick which one is the best. Dog is clearly dominant on the pet side. Cats get second
that's
place.
right.
And then the other thing is, we have a natural valuation governor on livestock because you've got to solve an ROI equation for the producer. Whereas on the pet side, as long as the pet owner is willing to pay,
Yeah,
you can price.
that's right.
Right? On the livestock, it's got to have an economic impact, or you're not going to get price for your product.
That's right. Okay, a fun question for you.
Mhm.
Beatrice wants to know if you had an unlimited research budget and zero bureaucratic hassle,
Mhm.
what's the first experiment you'd run?
That's a good one. Well, let me. Here's what I do with it. I would go after the most important human diseases that had an analog in animals, and
Oh,
I'd prove them there first,
huh.
and then use that to go like make a whole bunch of money on the human side.
I love
Yeah.
that. That's great. Joe wants to know if BiomEdit was a film, a piece of music, or a novel.
Hmm.
What would it be?
Oh, if BiomEdit was a novel, it would be The Hobbit. Sort of this unsuspecting hero from the Shire who was
Uh-huh.
sort of found itself in this expedition to help pioneer, pave a way, and then found something meaningful, more existential than that along the way, and
I love that.
set forth the good versus evil
That's very cool.
situation that occurred. I don't really
You're the
think about.
hobbits.
Yeah, we're the hobbits. We're humble.
So we're gonna come over, have some beer.
Absolutely.
and-
Yep.
I
Yeah.
I think that would be fun. That seems like a personality that would want to hang
Yeah.
out with. Okay, my final question for you. One of the things I always find that's interesting, just having conversations with you about animal health in general, you're kind of a futurist. Like I think of you as a
Okay.
futurist because you are very keen on what's happening and just we just talked about human health and
Mhm.
investor stuff that's going on. So I would love to know from you, when you look ahead down the road in animal health, what shifts do you think will help shape, animal health in the next decade?
Yeah. Look, I think we're on the verge, to use the root twice, of a convergence.
Hmm.
That I think we're starting to see biology as more common and convergent than in
Hmm.
different sectors. If you think about microbiome itself, it's resided soil microbiome,
That's right.
gut microbiome in animals, gut microbiome in humans. I think those are going to converge. I think this whole topic of One Health is going to
Yeah.
become much more prominent. It's very interesting to think about really cool challenges, next level, meta level challenges, like what happens if a biologic threat threatens our food supply?
Hmm.
Okay. Well, that could undermine our whole economy,
That's right.
right? What if COVID hit cows and chickens at the same time? Right? What would
Yeah.
happen to our protein sources, right? And or I like this idea of the science going in reverse, that we can use animal health as a way to pioneer new technology platforms and then translate them to human applications. So to me, these are all interesting things. The sustainability question, right? It's about preserving the planet so that we can go on to so all of these things are sort of next level. They're not about the animal so much anymore, but
That's right.
the broader concept of where does the animal fit in these broader ecosystem questions, and what can we do with technology to make sure they realize their full potential.
And it's almost like One Health is finally maturing.
I think so. I think it was an academic construct,
Yeah.
right? And more
Yeah.
of an, an international gathering topic
Yeah.
as opposed to something that you need an industry around, right?
That's right.
It's like the auto industry when they started talking about electric cars, and they were still worried about leaded gasoline, right? It just seems so out of place.
It's like that doesn't
right?
translate.
If you talked about One Health, 15 years ago, it's like giving people more goats in Africa.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. We had to really explain what
right.
this is about and what are the components, and just getting past that.
But you even look like at highly pathogenic avian influenza, right? Starts in wild fowl, ends up in production animals, in chickens, migrates to other production settings like cows. Cats drink the cow milk in a barn and get it. And now humans are getting it. So it's across 4 different species that we care about coming up with solutions for.
Yeah.
Yet there's no convergent approach to trying to do something about it. The biology is common, right? It is the H5N1, viral construct, and so we ought to be able to, leverage all we've learned and avoid the things that didn't work the last time to bring forward something. But there's no rallying cry for it. So this is where industry has to step up and say, I think we can do that.
Yeah.
And do something about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And we wrote a grant for that, and we have a grant for that. So we're starting to do something.
So you're
about
doing it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, I thank you so much for coming
bet.
in and being our very first guest. It's
an
a
honor.
historic day
Yeah.
for us. And I would love for you to come back in 1 year.
Sure.
And we'll talk again, and we'll pull out the old tape and say, where did you think you would be?
That's
Here
right.
you are, right? Or
Yeah.
you're going to be even beyond that, which is
And
awesome.
if you ever need a guest host, let me know.
Really?
Yeah, I'd
Oh
love
my
to do it.
gosh. Oh, you'll have to join the round table.
I get to pick the guest, though.
Oh,
I'll join the round table anytime.
Okay, you need to give me your. If I got to pick the guest,
short
here
list.
would be
I'll give you
my
short
short list.
list. Yeah,
I'd
that's
like to
good.
see that.
All
That'd be
right.
good.
Awesome.
Thank you, Aaron. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Yep. You bet.
Thanks.